You're listening to the SoulShape Podcast, where we focus on your spiritual fitness, or what we like to call your energetic self-care. We're sisters and the co-founders of SoulShape, a quantum wellness app designed to make it easier and accessible to find healing practitioners in the energy healing world and the soon-to-be Soul Gym. We want to have soulful conversations about spirituality and holistic wellness. And whether you're dabbling or taking a deep dive into energy healing, we want to introduce modalities and healing practitioners to you one by one. So it's time to get into Soul Shape. My name is LJ Woodard, and this is my sister, Leslie Bennett. Leslie, who are we talking with today?
We're talking with Crystal Rasmussen and Generational Healing. She's a teacher, and she works with this modality in an official capacity.
Yes.
It's also one of those modalities, as you know, where my left brain and right brain just don't get, my magical thinker and my logical thinker, they just sit back and go, okay, yes, more.
Well, I can just sense and feel that there's going to be a lot of listeners out there that are dying to know want to know about generational healing. I would suspect that people feel like, why am I feeling this? Why is this always happening? Or why do I continue to do this? I bet it has something to do with generational healing. But I need to give you a little background on you, Miss Crystal, here. So Crystal is a professionally trained and certified generational healer and teacher. She's a spiritual guide and author as well. And she supports you in releasing pain and suffering from your ancient bloodline stored within your genetic lineage to heal you today. Clearing the way for future generations by healing the densities you inherited. What does that mean?
Let's start with an easy one, Crystal.
Yeah.
We're going to clear the way for future generations. But do we inherit the muck from our ancestors?
Absolutely, we do. If you look at your parents and your grandparents, and you might wonder, like, why are they the way they are? Why am I the way I am? Why do I feel a particular way? Why do I have anxiety? Why do I have depression? Why do I have anger? And I don't know why. I seem to get ahead, or I feel stuck, or I continually have these struggles and these issues that no matter what I do, I can't quite get over them. I can't quite heal them. I can't quite recover. So a lot of those things that you do struggle with, and every single person carries generational trauma, every single person. But a lot of the things that you struggle with, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual, it can be due to an unhealed trauma that one of your ancestors experienced. So what happens is that when someone dies, they pass away, they leave this earth plane, and they've experienced something that's been left unhealed within, right? I mean, we've all and it looks different for each and every one of us, yet it affects us. But that unhealed trauma creates a density that then, when that person dies, that density stays here on earth and it has to go somewhere. So what happens is it gets, I'm going to use this term, even though that's not necessarily correct, but it gets locked up within the bloodline. Okay. And so it will continue to get passed down from one generation to the next until it's healed. And that it does not matter how far back. So it could be 7 generations, 5 generations, 15, 20 generations or more. And those unhealed traumas are expressing themselves through you, through how you feel emotionally, physically within your body, through how you perceive the world. It affects our relationships, not only within our family, but how our relationships with other people,
Mm-hmm.
from intimate partners, lovers, husbands, wives, friends. It shapes how we see the world and the circumstances and experiences we have. And what happens is when you heal those unhealed traumas, and with generational healing, we are working directly with the ancestors that are seeking that healing. And so that healing takes place for your ancestor, for the ancestor that comes forward, because you are the carrier of their trauma. There will be an ancestor that a generational healer has a conversation with, and we are trained to offer that healing to one of your ancestors. And what happens is that ancestor receives the healing, as do you. So that density, that unhealed trauma that you've been carrying, it's been affecting you and your family, no matter what it is then released, so that you get to experience and be more of who you truly are within the world, without all of that gunk.
Yep.
That continues to get passed down.
That's a lot, right? So it's hard. So here's again, I'm going to go left brain, right brain here. So my magical thinker's like, wow, this is amazing. You can talk, and just to let the listeners know, I've done 2 sessions with Crystal. So I went back for more, just so you know, because they were interesting, and I've done one remotely and I've done one in person. So I remember the first time I was more in the logical skeptic side of me and didn't understand it. But I accepted it. I allowed what you told me. I allowed the conversation, because what Crystal has you do is when you do a remote session, you just sit there. You don't talk to her for the hour, whatever, half hour. I forget the time it was booked. And I just meditated, and I just listened to where it was in my body that was lighting up. Very subtle, Was it itching? Was it, was I experiencing pain? Was I, what thoughts were I thinking? Like, was my self-talk horrible or positive? And then you call her at the end of that hour, and then she'll tell you what her conversation was. And you can kind of compare notes. And I remember going, I don't know. I remember doubting it. And I don't remember where I flipped to the believer. Maybe something happened, and I can't remember, because this was several years ago now. So I guess my question to you is, when you go through these conversations with our ancestor, is it more than one sometimes, or is it usually just one?
It is always one with generational healing, because
Okay.
we are working and healing the trauma that your ancestor was never able to heal or express or share or communicate within their life while they lived here on earth.
Yeah.
And
I guess I would think about too. My thoughts are all over the place right now. That's why I'm like pausing here. Maybe tell us how you connect with those ancestors. Like, let's say maybe I was really close to a specific ancestor that's passed. So let's say I kind of knew my grandmother, or I guess there's, in some instances, there could be some great grandmothers out there. But I feel like there was some unsaid connection. Can generational helping, direct it, or is it more of the unknown? Like, I don't know, there was a 5th generational, aunt who's impacted my field.
absolutely. So with generational healing, we aren't mediums. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a conversation with the people that you know, where those are really great and wonderful and can be so deeply healing for you as an individual. With generational healing, we aren't working with your grandparents or even your great grandparents. We are working with your ancestors that walked this earth generations and generations before you.
Mm.
So usually when I am, and I was in an apprenticeship training. It's the 13 Mystical Wisdom Teachings apprenticeship training in order to prepare and learn how to facilitate generational healing in the way that it's been designed by the ancestors of the earth. And what happens is, so when I'm facilitating generational healing, you're receiving a session. There is, I mean, I always say you can certainly set an intention. However, the ancestors know much more than I do, much more than we do, because
sure.
we have our own, we have our own ideas of what needs to be healed in our life, or what we're struggling with, or what needs to be healed in the family. Because we can go, oh, there's abuse here, there's addiction here, there's self-doubt there, there's lack and poverty here. Whatever is, anger and rage over here, whatever it is, sadness and grief. We have these ideas of gets passed down within the lineage. This is what I see in my family, and this is what needs healed. So that comes from the logical mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens with generational healing is it's a complete surrender. It's a complete surrender and opening to receive the healing that the ancestors would like to share with you, because they come in and they choose. They know what you're available for, and what is going to benefit you the most at that time.
Yep. I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Maybe I know that the generational healing modality has a specific training. Maybe talk about more about that, because
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The generational healing, I'm going to give you a little background because I can talk about generational healing all day long.
We could listen all day long too. So lay it on us, sister.
My teacher is Deborah Sky King. Okay. She is the founder of Generational Healing. She's based in Canada. And she came in to the world very awake. She was always in communication and has been with the ancestors, with the earth, with the unseen energies. And she's always trusted and listened to her counsel's guidance. Okay. So whenever she is told to do something, she does it. Always has. And back in, I want to say it was 2008, she was told to go to Guatemala and spend 40 days in the jungle, which she did.
Wow.
She went, yeah.
That's a hard ask to follow. Go to the jungle now.
It is. And she knew exactly the date she needed to go. She knew like what location she was flying into. Beyond that, she knew nothing else. And of course, she had a young child at home at the time, so it's all the things, right? Yeah. How do I do that? Well,
it wasn't an easy thing to do.
It's never about the how.
Nope, it wasn't. And so she listened, and she spent 40 days in the Guatemala jungle, doing what was asked. And of course, as soon as she landed, she was guided and led to the exact location. And in where she needed to be. But she's always been working with teachers and elders, not necessarily that are living today. Okay. And what happened at the end of those 40 days is she was asked to return. Over a period of 4 years, she continually returned at different times and did ceremony, what was asked of her. And at the end of the 4th year, after the last ceremony she had completed, the ancestors of the earth came forward in a Maya temple in the jungle of Guatemala. And they gave her a vision of what the earth could look like and how much more peace and joy and happiness there could be. You know, that new earth that we're always reaching for and looking for and ready for. And we're
talking about a lot.
Exactly. And the ancestors shared with her, in order for this to happen, we, the ancestors, let me back up. Humanity needs to evolve. Okay. And you can look at that. I mean, look at how much separation is in the world and what is happening within the world, within families, within our own lives. They said, in order for that to happen, the ancestors themselves need healing. And they asked her if she would take this mission on and bring it into the world.
Wow.
And of course, she's like, hands down, yes, absolutely. You know, it benefits the earth. She's a wisdom keeper. You know, she's an earth wisdom keeper. And she's like, whatever I need to do, absolutely. And so she took what they gifted her in the Guatemala jungle in that Maya temple, that Maya pyramid, and she brought it into her own practice for years, working very closely with the ancestors and doing a lot of research. And had amazing, life-changing results with people. And back in 2015, she was finally given the go-ahead to teach generational healing. And she opened up an apprenticeship training, which is called the 13 Mystical Wisdom Teachings. And I was part of that original apprenticeship training. And I went through that for a year. It was 13 months at the time. It's now 13 weeks online. You can start immediately. It is life altering. Remember, you know, because we always do the things that are going to benefit us, right? We do the grounding and the, you know, like, okay, looking at where do we need to shift and change and alter. And these 13 teachings are 13 initiations. And what happens is it anchors and begins to embody within you these teachings, from grounding to managing your energy to clearing mental chaos and emotional sensitivity, bilocation and heart healing. And you learn also how to track different energies within your system, your field. And you learn how to work with your own inner shadow. And these are all 13 teachings, 13 initiations that she presents within that apprenticeship training, within the 13 Mystical Wisdom Teachings. And as I went through that, I had no idea what I was signing up for. I'm just going to be flat out honest. I had no freaking clue.
I've had those experiences.
Yeah,
a friend took me and I said, I'm going to rethink the friendship. That was too much. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, I had no idea. All I knew when she released it was that I was studying with her through soul therapy school. And I knew she was super psychic and super intuitive and could shift and change energy, transform it so quickly and easily and effortlessly, and heal trauma that you didn't even know you had. And I was like, okay, well, she's amazing. And truth has always been one of my number one things that I've like,
Yeah.
my values, right? Is like, okay, what's the truth here? What's underneath that anxiety? What's underneath the depression? What's underneath the mental illness or the diagnosis? And oh, I lost my train of thought. So
The training.
so I had no idea like what was happening, what was going to change. And as I went through those teachings and those initiations, I personally began to feel better.
Wow,
And
I love that story.
I know, like, I was like, okay, so I feel much more grounded. And I thought I was grounded because
Right?
I had been doing a lot of work for a long time.
Right.
I thought I was grounded. I thought my heart was open. Yeah, no. But what happened is I began to trust myself so much more. And there was so much more synchronicity happening within my life. And my son, he was 15 at the time of I was going through that training. And I remember very specifically him coming up to me and giving me a hug and kissing me on the head and telling me, thanks for the work that you've been doing, Mom. He had no idea what I was doing. He just knew that there were things shifting for him, within me, within the family dynamics as a whole.
That's awesome.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a gift.
It's a huge gift. During that time, I'm originally from Montana. So, you know, I grew up on a ranch, and my family, I always knew they loved me, right? My dad, though, he's like this big guy and never really expressed those I love you words. And of course, I knew he did, and he showed it, but he never shared those. And I remember sitting there. No, we were standing outside, and I think we were drinking a beer together. And my dad looked at me, and he said, I love you. And I was in my late 30s. And I was like, that was the first time I ever remember him saying those words to me.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh. So the 13 mystical wisdom teachings not only helped support me and heal me, helped me feel safer within the world and more grounded and awaken my spiritual gifts, but it also altered and shifted relationships in my family. Huge, massive. And so I remember after the last initiation, we went to 7-day generational healing certification training. So here we are as students going, what is generational healing? You know, I mean, this is 8 years ago. Like, it's back in 2015, 2016. Like, it was a long time ago. And we're all like, nobody was talking about generational healing back then. And Deborah Sky facilitated a session with me. And I remember lying there and seeing the ancestor share her story. She was showing me her life through her eyes. And when I sat up, even though I didn't necessarily relate to what she shared and I didn't experience the same thing she shared, what happened within me was there was so much shifting at the DNA level, because that's what generational healing does. That shifts at the DNA level, that I sat up and everything was brighter. colors were different.
Yep.
I felt lighter. I felt more energized. I felt amazing. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like this is life changing, because suddenly I had an understanding of why I behaved and operated the way I did. I had an understanding and validation of why my entire family made certain choices, right?
Right.
There was so much clarity in every area of my life after receiving generational healing. And the next day, this guy looks at me and she's like, okay, Crystal, you're going to facilitate generational healing. And I was sitting in the chair going, oh my God, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I was terrified,
Right.
like literally shaking. I was ready to bolt and run out the room. And
As most of us would.
and she was so amazing and so patient with me. And she's like, Crystal, it's okay. I'm right here. And she's really supported me through my fears on so many levels over the years. And okay, so I proceeded to do the opening sequence that you are taught at the training, and I everything that was taught over the 13 mystical wisdom teachings and everything that was taught over that 7-day certification training for generational healing. And suddenly I stepped into a multidimensional framework, and there was an ancestor of the other student, like standing there sharing his life and his story with me. And there was no way I could have made any of it up, because that's where the mind goes, right?
Yep.
And he was sharing, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this, like, everything else within the 3D realm sort of vanished. It like faded into the background. And so I'm simply with him and the client and my teacher at the time, Sky. And I remember, I don't even remember necessarily what he shared, but what I do remember is the feeling of unconditional love that washed over me once he had received that healing. The ancestor had received that healing. Is he and the earth shared so much unconditional love because he had so much gratitude for that healing that I don't cry often, and I had tears streaming down my face.
Wow.
Because it was one of the most humbling, rewarding experiences I had ever had. And I stepped away from that session, that very first session I facilitated. And I looked at Sky and I said, I just found my purpose. And she's like, yep.
Wow. That's amazing, Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know this story.
Yeah, no, it's.
Yep.
I know we needed to hear
We
this.
totally needed to hear this. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
it's always interesting to hear how healers, find their path, find their way. What led you to this work? And one of the things you said, it's in generational healing, when you say people don't even realize like trauma that they didn't even know that they had. And I'm curious, can you give an example of that? Like if you were working with someone and you explain like a trauma and you're like, I don't even know I had that, and how that ends up benefiting them and healing them if I didn't even know I had this trauma.
Many of them. Go ahead, Leslie.
I was going to say I could share what happened in mine.
Okay. Or I don't.
Where do I look? So at LA Conscious Life Expo, which is the one we did in person, or maybe it was the long distance one. I don't remember, but it was a woman, and because she knows me, she'll know this.
She's my sister. I know her.
So what it was a woman who had lots of ideas and a voice, but she wasn't allowed to express it. Like, she was told, you're a woman, you can't do it. And so and I can't remember how it got resolved or how it got healed, but I remember that, and I've always been that person that, was always outspoken, but never seemed to get far because of that. Because I think she got punished for being outspoken or something. I can't quite remember, but
Well,
it's
if
something
it's
like
an
that.
ancestor and she's a woman, I mean,
Well, there are periods in life where women did rule, but anyway,
true.
maybe there's another example that seems to pop out, and that was probably really good because I didn't remember
Oh,
it very well.
yes, yes, I can. There's so many. There are so many. Um, but I always want to make sure that I talk about case studies or somebody that has given me permission to talk because,
Of course, of
they're
course.
super personal.
Mhm.
It's super personal and very intimate. But most people, after they receive generational healing, they sit up and they feel lighter.
That's
And
true.
hmm and they're like, oh, I just thought that was me and why I thought that way.
I mean, it
So I'm
sounds
going to
like
give
a
you
weight's been lifted, but it's not even your
exactly.
weight. We're carrying the
It's
weight of our ancestors.
We are by choice, and it is choice because you choose before you incarnate into this realm
Okay.
which family you are going to incarnate into. Okay, so it's all choice. But there was a gentleman, and he came in, and he was in his early 20s. And I remember him walking in, and he was really shy, and he shuffled his feet a little bit. And I'm like, hey, how are you? And what brought you in to receive generational healing today? And Decker, he looked at me and he says, I've got a lot of things happening in my life right now. And my friend thought it would really benefit me. And so I thought I would try it out. He says, I've heard really good things about you. So I trust you, just whatever shows up. And because he didn't know, had no idea. He just knew life wasn't working, right? To the degree that he wanted, which is how most of us feel.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's relationships or family or finances or health, most of us have something that's not working the way we want it to. And I look at Decker and I'm like, okay, well, let's just see what comes up. And I'm going to connect with one of your ancestors, and I'm going to share and communicate what he or she says, and I'll let you know when we are complete and the healing is over. You can sit up and we can have a little visit. He says, okay. And so he lied down to receive generational healing on the massage table I had set up. And again, I went through what I was trained to do and connected with one of his ancestors from generations ago. And his ancestor shared a story around how he had always tried to be a good guy, but every time he tried to be a good guy, that it seemed to backfire on him. Okay, that was the essence of the session itself, and I can't remember all of the specific details, but essentially it was that, and he shared a lot around what had transpired in his life. And at the completion of Decker's generational healing session, Decker sat up and he looked at me and he said, wow. And then he was silent for about 10 minutes because there was so much information processing within him, so much energy shifting. Okay. A lot of times people feel a little, I don't know, ungrounded because there's so much energy shifted. So they might feel a little lightheaded. And he looks at me and he says, you just got to the core root of everything I've been struggling with my entire life.
Wow.
And we continued to have a short conversation. And the next day, Decker brought in a testimonial. And he says, hi, my name is Decker, and I never write testimonials. But what
But
he
this time,
yeah, exactly. He continued to share in that testimonial how he had been to doctors and psychiatrists and therapists, and he's done all of these different things trying to resolve how he was self-sabotaging his own life and what was showing up in his life. And he said that what transpired during that generational healing session got to the root issue, the core truth of everything he'd been struggling with. And so, more than anybody else could, he left that session changed, completely altered in how he perceived the world. And there were so many differences that happened. So even though he didn't necessarily know or experience the same thing, the core energy of that specific self-sabotage he had been carrying and he recognized. Okay. There's another woman, she came in crippling anxiety. Amber, it was like controlled her everyday life. She would have multiple anxiety attacks every single day. She was on medication. It controlled how she felt, the choices she made. She withdrew, she shut down, she hid. She didn't want to go out. She didn't want to engage with others, her family, her friends, the world, because the anxiety was so incredibly high for her. And she comes in and she's like, Crystal, I know the ancestors always choose, and I honor that. And if I could receive some help with relieving some of this anxiety, that would be really phenomenal, right?
Right.
And
pretty please.
And of course, I connected with one of her ancestors, in the way that I was trained, and communicated Amber's ancestor's story with her, and facilitated a healing, because it's not just about the communication piece, it's also about offering that healing. Okay. And she sat up and she looked at me with a tear streaming down her face, and she says, Crystal, my mind has never been this quiet before, ever.
Wow.
Her entire life. And she's like, it's so different. I don't really know what to do, because like it feels like something's missing, right? Because you've got that mind chatter.
Right.
Clearing mental chaos is another 13 mystical wisdom teachings. It's phenomenal. And she's like, oh my gosh, like I feel peaceful. She's like, this is so new for me. And she left, and we were visiting on the phone about a week later, and Amber says, Crystal, I have not had an anxiety attack all week since I've received generational healing.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's great. And of course, because we're human and we're like, yeah, I don't know if skeptical, right, Leslie?
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe this. I'm kind of expect it's gonna come back, and
exactly.
Like, hey, like most things work for a little bit, but then they kind of resurface.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, she sent me a message, and she's like, oh my gosh, Crystal, you have to hear my new milestone. She says, I am off all of my anxiety medication, and I haven't had an anxiety attack since receiving generational
that's very
healing.
cool. That's I'm so
And
happy for Amber.
Well, clearing
yep,
clearing mental chaos would that's a
yes,
game
yes,
changer, a life changer.
uh-huh.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's anything, anything that those things that you think are who you are, or your this is just the way my parents are, this is just the way my children are, my siblings.
I mean, are
It's
some people
really due
coming
to a
in that
trauma.
have depression, that have alcoholism?
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, what is it?
Yep.
Like, it's
Yep.
everything.
It's everything. Yes, I remember there was a woman, Sam. She came in and she wasn't necessarily suicidal, but the thoughts were always there. Yeah, a lot of depression, a lot of withdrawing, a lot of shutting down. And she came in, and following that, her generational healing session, she looked at me and she says, Crystal, I never understood why I thought the way I did, because I didn't have a reason to think this way, because my family was like, I don't remember any necessarily trauma happening.
Yeah.
I don't know, like there was no reason for her to feel so depressed in the way that she did.
Right.
And she said she would go to bed at night praying not to wake up the next morning because she no longer wanted to exist. And for a lot of us, especially those that are spiritual seekers, we don't feel like we belong here on earth.
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
we often say, this is my last lifetime. I'm not coming back.
Exactly.
Well,
Yep.
Crystal, it sounds so it's fascinating. I would think anyone that really that is a soul seeker, but also open to, I would encourage them to try this generational healing. It sounds very impactful and very.
I know it's calling to a few listeners like, wow, I need to seek this out. That's kind of what I did. So.
Yeah. It is truly life-changing, and for each individual, and each time you receive generational healing, it's a different healing.
It is.
It's a different, it's not the same. It's not the same experience.
Nope.
Because we carry so much, we carry the gifts of our ancestors and the unhealed trauma.
Yeah. Well, we could keep going. Like
I know,
you said, we could talk.
There's
and talk.
a lot. There was a lot to learn from you, for sure.
So it's time of this episode where we're at the soulful stretch, and for those that have not heard us, this is the first time. The soulful stretch is something where we've expanded our consciousness, changed a belief, or shifted something within this conversation or in our lives. For me, during this conversation, I think one of the messages that I heard for me is just, because this is so one of those modalities that has a level of trust to receiving the message. I like the idea of surrender. Just take a moment and surrender to the process. Trust that, Crystal and others who get trained in generational healing have done their 13
mystical wisdom teachings,
done their wisdoms and done their training, and are receiving these messages and healings. And so I really like the idea of surrender. So that's my stretch right now, is surrendering.
And my stretch was learning this modality, learning more about it, opening my mind to a possibility of healing through this generational healing, maybe realizing traumas you never knew you even had. There might be some things that are going on in your life. And you're like, what is that reoccurring thing? And you just don't even realize it. And maybe generational healing can make me aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, my soulful stretch. Let's see. My soulful stretch is always continually learning the practice of being present to what's actually happening, not necessarily on the surface level, but the unseen energies that are affecting you.
Do I dare say that's deep? That's good. Well, Crystal, we're going to have to wrap things up. Thank you so Thank you so much, Crystal. This has been enlightening and wonderful. And I always like to say thank you to my sister, Leslie, and Signal Fire Media. And to all our listeners, we really believe here at SoulShape, we believe that wellness starts within and that you can unlock unlimited possibilities with energetic healing. Embrace the woo, embrace generational healing, dabble, dive, or discover your next healing experience on the SoulShape app. And we hope you've enjoyed this soulful stretch, and we encourage you to do something to raise your vibration today because the ripple effects are endless. Join us again and be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the SoulShape podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Until next time. Bye, Crystal.
Bye, Crystal.
Bye. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Still going out and doing stuff on the road?